Hi, everyone, and welcome. Happy International Day of Women and Girls in Science. To celebrate this occasion, we invited phenomenal and outstanding women in space. Last year, we had such a huge success at the first ever Space for All session in March on the International Women's Day. So we decided to organize its second edition. And I'm very excited to welcome today's speakers. And I'd like to introduce to you the moderator of the event, Shelley Brunswick, the CEO of Space Foundation. Shelley has had a distinguished career as a space acquisition and program manager leader. She collaborates with organizations around the world to advance the opportunities for entrepreneurs, piloting the launch of the Space Commerce Entrepreneurship Program and the Junior Space Entrepreneur Program. As a leading role model for women in space, Shelley won the 2020 Diversity Inclusion Officer and Role Model of the Year award. Shelley, we are excited to have you with us today, and I will give this stage to you, over to you. Hi, everyone who is joining us in the chat. Say hi and let us know where you're joining from. We have registrations from 33 countries, so it's a truly diverse conversation today. And you feel free to use the chat to share something whenever you hear that something resonates with you or to ask questions. Don't be shy and have a great time today.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's such a pleasure to be collaborating with you again in Women Tech Network. You are literally changing the world and creating access and opportunity for individuals, men, women, all regions of the world to come into the space ecosystem, the technology industry. So thank you for being a change maker.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Shelley.
Well, as Anna was kind enough to introduce, I'm Shelley Brunswick. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Space Foundation. And today I have the honor of moderating this international interdisciplinary panel of women space tech leaders for Women Tech Network on the International Day for Women and Girls in Science. Again, a special thank you for Women Tech Network to make this event possible. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to introduce each of our guests and they're going to give an opening statement. So first, I'd like to introduce Heather Richmond. Hello, Heather.
Hi, Shelley. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Great.
So Heather is the founder of Defense Investor Network. She's also the founder of Family Office Command and the entrepreneur in resident at BMNT. Heather is a seasoned corporate development and strategic expert with a long-standing focus on the intersection of national security, technology, and investment. Heather, over to you for your opening thoughts.
Shelley, first of all, I'm not sure if everyone watching knows this, and I know there's a little bit of reference to it, but Shelley, thank you for everything you do. You've really brought me into this community and supported me in my journey moving into the space realm. And I cannot thank you enough. And you continue to really unite smart and amazing women and men, today women. So I just really thank you for having me. Thank you for all the work that you do. It's really an honor to be a friend of yours. So just thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Richmond. I'm based out here in Palo Alto, California, just next to Stanford University. I'm just going to start off a little bit about myself. I have two daughters who are 10 and 3. So this is a very near and dear to my heart. And my daughter the other day, my 13-year-old, just informed me that she wants to be an astrophysicist. So there you go, right? So things are resonating. I'm based here in Palo Alto, California, as I said. I spent some time early in my career back in 1999 in Washington, D.C., working for Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, who's now the majority leader doing appropriations, budget, and tax. So was working on defense appropriations, funding space way back in the 90s. Moved out here to California and was working at Stanford University for quite some time on government relations, helping set up something called the Precourt Institute for Energy. That actually took me over to work on a Navy project in Hawaii, where I had the honor and pleasure of actually starting something called Elemental Accelerator, which we're actually using Hawaii as a test bed for innovation. And that was started by 3 awesome women. Two other awesome women and myself, which is cool. And we actually had to hire a white male for diversity one time, which was a pretty cool thing to have to do. So fast forward, actually started working with a couple special forces commanders about 7 or 8 years ago, which got me right in this intersection. I live in Palo Alto, right here next to something called Sand Hill Road, which is a very famous road where a lot of venture investors operate. And I found myself at this intersection most recently of commercial space and military space, and kind of figuring out How do we how do we get these two worlds to work together? How do we get investors to communicate with the government and vice versa? How do we do that effectively? So I know Shelley, it spends a lot of time translating between different worlds, and I do a lot of that as well. And I'm thrilled to be here with Adi and other folks, and 33 countries is incredible. I focus a lot on allied innovation. So as we look at countries that we trust and partner with, we do a lot of work, obviously, with Israel, with the UK, with Australia, and others. And so I am so thrilled to be here. As Shelley mentioned, I run something called the Defense Investor Network, which is really around this idea of trusted capital and allied capital. So how do we make sure that those mission critical companies in space and other industries have clean money in them, and so that we can trust where they're going? But I'll share more. But Shelley, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. And for our audience, we really look to make sure that, yes, today's panel is women, but it is women from around the world, and it's women with very different backgrounds. And as Heather said, we both at one time worked on Capitol Hill, not at the same time, but we have that political background because policymakers are part of the space ecosystem, and creating pathways into legislation to create the opportunity to have space and workforce development. So plus her background as an investor, I thought would be really valuable to highlight for entrepreneurs, investors, and those who want to be policymakers or international relations, the background that Heather brings. Now I have a great, and again, thank you, Heather, for the great introduction.
You're welcome.
Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Adi Nino Greenberg. Adi is a space and satellite expert with over 20 years of experience in the space sector. She is the chief scientific advisor at the Israeli Space Agency at the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Technology. Adi is the scientific and technical coordinator of the bilateral relations with the UAE Space Agency on behalf of the Israeli Space Agency. So Adi and I are friends. We are both mentors for the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs Space for Women program. We actually got to meet for the first time in person in October at Dubai Expo at the UNUSA event. So Adi, it's so good to see you again. And I'd like to open the floor for your thoughts on what's going on in the global space ecosystem.
So hi, first of all, thank you. And it is great to be here. Shelley, it's great to be your friend. It's a great opportunity to talk to you today with all the people that are listening to us. I have to tell you that my kids are very excited. I have 3 kids. We live in Israel, so shalom from Israel. 2 of my 3 kids have corona. And we succeeded not having corona for 2 years, and over the last week it's like crazy here. So all of the time they're knocking at my door, and we would like to participate as well in the international panel. And I'm like muting and screaming to them, close the door, close the door. I'm in a meeting now. So it's great to be here, and it's great to meet you, Heather. And yes, as you said, Shelley, I'm a planetary scientist. I live and breathe space and planetary science for more than 20 years. It is a childhood dream. I will tell you a little bit more about it once we get once we start rolling. But yes, it is great to work and to study and to be a mentor and to be able to bring all the passion and my knowledge and my expertise to the space ecosystem. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Adi, and I'm so glad you can join us. And I'm really excited that your kids are excited that they get to see you being a game changer and providing that role model to the world, because there are women and men around the world who look to you and say, oh, well, maybe I want to be a planetary scientist. What does that even mean? And how do I do that? And this is an exciting time to do that with the James Webb Space Telescope going up. We're going to get all kinds of data and images that we've never imagined. I mean, it's 100 times more powerful than Hubble, so we can only imagine the secrets we're going to unlock from the universe. So Adi, I'm sure you'll be part of helping us unravel those secrets soon.
Hope so.
Hope so. Wonderful. Well, let me ask a couple questions. Heather, let me pivot back to you. Now, we talked a little bit about your background, and you started, kind of on Capitol Hill with that political science background, being a staffer. And I think it's really important to highlight to men and women around the world that there are many career paths into the space ecosystem. Yes, we need those STEM professionals. We need scientists like Adi, but we also need political science and international relations and diplomacy and artists. And so you kind of can talk a little bit about what kind of drove you to be part of policy making and change making at that level. And how did you go from DC and now you're out in San Francisco? And how did you kind of get into that investing sector? And how did you even get into that? And then, and I might save it for later, but you're not only an investor, but you're an entrepreneur because you started two of these organizations. So those are kind of three. I'll give you those 3 points, and then I'm going to pivot back to Adi for some more from her.
You got it. All right. I love when people check out my LinkedIn profile and they're like, it's so eclectic and doesn't make any sense. And there's no clear pathway to anything that I've ever done. And I think a little bit of that is I'm a bit of an opportunist. I think, as my career path has kind of wound around and I started in policy, I believe that, those who have the power can change the rules a little bit. And I was once told that I'm better at changing rules than following them, which is why I didn't go to law school. And I think that as we, a big piece of the way of how innovation, really is enabled is through policy. And I think that people who, it's amazing to have that background and understand how that works. We all work in very, very regulated industries, obviously for all the reasons that, for safety and security. But I think understanding how the rules exist, how the rules are, what standards are, what regulations exist, but then also when it's time to know how to change them. Truly, I think there are a lot of legacy regulations, legacy policies that are ineffective and actually I think sometimes prohibit innovation. We see that a lot, and so having been inside a government and understanding how that works and understanding kind of which levers to pull and how to communicate in that space. But then I also quickly realized that it's really important that the political world is actually communicating effectively with the outside innovation world, with the commercial space industry, and making sure that these two worlds are communicating. And we spend a lot of money on the government side around innovation. Obviously, space is a very government-dominated industry. But as we've seen with SpaceX and other things, I mean, the commercial space ecosystem right now, just over the last decade, I think has exploded, and no pun intended. But it's really, really, I mean, we've now got private investors spending a lot of time and money, in the private sector, but working on space and working collectively with government and we recently stood up something called Space Force. We have a whole new element of our Department of Defense, Space Force, and I have the pleasure of working very closely with a number of the folks there. They just set up something called Space Works, which is kind of the sandbox, if you will, or the innovation hub around Space Force. And because I kind of was sitting in this middle space and got to know the folks both at Space Force, and which is actually underneath of Air Force, and had worked very closely with the Air Force over the years, and also know the folks in Washington, D.C. I get a call one day saying, can you help us on the investor relations side? We're getting all this amazing inbound attention from investors, because a lot of investors are trying to figure out what does our military, what does our government need next in the space domain. And so there hasn't been that connective tissue between the investor world and the commercial space world, and then the government world, and specifically the Department of Defense. And so I, sometimes am no more than a translator, but I'm learning how important that is. If you understand, where the policies are, where the regulations are, how to affect them, how to change them, how to interpret them even, and then working closely, with folks inside the government, inside the military, and how to translate between the investor world. I think these two worlds feel very uncomfortable speaking to one another. There are some rules about how appropriate it is or how legal it is for different communities to be speaking to one another, and those are some rules and some feelings, I guess, that I'm trying to help change and enable. And back to this concept of trusted capital, who are the investors that we can trust to put money in some of these mission critical capabilities. So, I mean, how did I get here? That's such a great question. I don't know. I was in Washington for about 5 years. Like I said, I was deferring law school here at Stanford. I came back, and it was actually the dean of the law school that it was actually Senator Schumer and the dean of law school that told me that I was better at changing laws than following them, which I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. But I kind of took that literally, and I said, you know what, you're right. And so I do go and try to work to change opinion and to change the way people behave. And I am not a behavioral psychologist, but figuring out how to get people to learn, kind of both sides of the coin, so that they then will make I think, different or better decisions. And so came out to Stanford and was doing government relations there. And I started to kind of understand or try to figure out kind of what do these investor people do all the time. I'm painfully unmotivated by money. So I was saying, how do they make decisions? How do they, sad for sure. How do they make decisions? What is this investing thing happening here? So I kind of just went and started talking to a bunch of investors just to figure out, kind of what makes them tick and how they make decisions and how do they pick which companies to invest in? How do they diligence? The term diligence is really important, I think, inside of government. We look a lot of times just at technical capability or just technology, where here in the Valley, a lot of the focus is put on the team. I think as the government and the military specifically, they look to innovate. The focus, actually, I just posted something on my LinkedIn a couple of days ago about the importance of people and the talent. And so I think focusing on people, a lot of times within government, they'll talk about contracting with a company. I think with, space is an excellent example with, but it's less about like maybe the actual technology and about the team. I mean, we're in a space now where things are so dynamic. If you look at cyber, things are changing constantly. Our adversaries are throwing crazy stuff at us all the time. And so how do we actually contract or work with outside talent and really the best world-class teams of people to solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve? So I'm a people person to the nth degree. And I think kind of reminding us that this isn't about buying a widget. This is about creating teams of people, world-class teams of people, harnessing those both through the United States, but also around the world, and figuring out, how do we innovate to be better and stronger? So I would go meet with investors, and there were kind of two buckets of investors that I found here in Silicon Valley. And one bucket was those that would tell me or remind me that Silicon Valley was built on with defense, defense dollars, defense resources for defense to build defense capabilities. Kind of the newer version of Silicon Valley. A lot of people don't know that or don't care. But I've really been on this mission for the last about 15 years since I moved back here in 2004. It's more than 15 years, to talk about this intersection of national security and innovation, because there has been a tipping point, I think, and people realizing that what you're working on has national security implications. Adi, we just had COVID at the end of December, my whole family, and even looking at that and what are the implications of this pandemic, on national security. And so I have a very broad view of what national security means, and so obviously space is an incredibly critical piece of that, just from an information standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint, all of it. And so, anyways, the second bucket of investors were these investors that I mentioned that weren't really kind of focused on the national security piece. But when I was looking to kind of create the Defense Investor Network back to people, I said, how do we get these two worlds talking? And I said, first of all, let's get the investors communicating with one another around those that are mission focused, those that do think, and again, I'm not saying they are always focused on defense. I mean, they're focused on lots of things, but who are those investors that just kind of see the world through a national security lens, I'll call it. And so it's part of their investment thought process as they're diligencing. Is this company mission critical? Is this company, critical to the national security of our country? So, and then, which investors, back to the idea of having clean or trusted capital. There are certain countries that we don't really trust their capital as much. And so what does that look like? And how is that part of the process? So I just started to kind of build these networks of investors. I started to, don't tell them, try to educate them, around what sorts of things our government and our military really need. And then actually enable kind of a two-way conversation. So it wasn't just government speaking to investors, but actually then the investors really learning to communicate on the government side to talk about their industries, to talk about, where are these world-class teams? Where are these world-class technologies? Are there capabilities or technologies inside of universities that we need to extract and fund? How do we do that quickly? How do we, clear those pathways so that we can be more efficient and more effective? It isn't so serendipitous, if you will. To be honest, it's just been this kind of really love for my country, but then two, just this ability to bring people together, to have conversations, and not just one time, but to have continuous ongoing conversations between groups of people that typically don't speak to one another and don't speak the same language. And so back to people and translating, that's just kind of, I've just kind of found my way. On the investment side, when you talk to hundreds of investors all the time, you learn a couple things, and I use them personally as kind of the eyes and the ears. So a lot of people kind of talk about tech scouting, and I was one person working for a very small group, trying to work, on innovation inside of DoD. But I said there's this constant ongoing struggle around, or I won't get into it, but around kind of funding cycles and how long sometimes it takes to work with government and to get a contract. But I said, you know what? It's really interesting because investors talk to these companies right when they're being formed, right at their nascent stage. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting, instead of us waiting for 2 years until they come out of stealth mode to start talking to them, if we could get some of these amazing teams talking to the government, thinking about working in a dual use environment, working for the military or for the government, kind of from day one, because the way you build a company is going to be a little bit different if it's got a dual use focus. So I'll stop there. It has been, I like I said, am opportunistic, and I sometimes will see white space, I'll see a void, and I say, let's go fill it. And a lot of times, more times than not, it's more about the ecosystem of people just realizing there's a space there, and I'm getting those folks, communicating. If there's a capability, bless you, that Space Force needs or SpaceWorks needs, let's go talk to the investors. Let's talk to those who see world-class talent and world-class ideas from like the moment of inception, rather than kind of waiting until it becomes a commercial product. But anyway, I've gone for years.
Well, awesome, Heather. It's exciting. So for our audience, all of us have different journeys. Adi and I probably have more of a similar journey, except she's actually a doctor and I'm not. But Adi, would you tell us about your journey and how did you get to where you are today? Because you've had a very interesting route, and similar to Heather, you are part of that international relations. And so I think hearing your journey from how you got to where you are, but also you're part of the team that negotiated the Abraham Accord with the UAE Space Agency. So I know there's a lot of interest in that as well. So over to you.
Okay, so let me start back in the 80s when I was 9 years old. As a young girl in a small town in Israel, we didn't have women in tech. We didn't have STEM, international programs, or even national programs. We basically climbed trees, and I was in the Scouts. I had an ADHD, but I think that everyone once had it. And I was a regular kid in a small town, as I said. My father, who is a doctor, he loves astronomy, and it's a hobby for him. And he always told me an amazing fact, that actually every time I lecture, and it doesn't matter if I lecture to kids or to high-tech companies, I always start with this story because I think it's inspiring. He told me an amazing fact. He told me that when you look at far objects in space through telescopes, you see them as they were when light emitted from them. It means that you're looking in the past. You're looking at the past, and maybe they are not the same as you see them right now. So it's like a time machine. And when I was 9 years old, my older sister and me, we went to see in the summer holiday the movie Back to the Future. It was the first one, and I'm sure that you all know or watched this fabulous movie. I know it by heart. With Doc and Marty, that they're building a time machine and trying to influence time in the future or in the past. And it was like not just looking through telescopes and seeing light, but it's like the next level. It's like building a time machine and like being very proactive. And as I said before, I was 9 years old, and when the movie finished, I told my sister that I know what I'm going to be when I will be grown up, and it will be a space researcher. And it happened. And I have to tell you that I didn't have a regular journey with a regular or formal path. I didn't study physics in high school. And it took me a while to understand that this is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I will be, at the end, a space researcher. So I decided to create my own path. And I got help by people that believed in me along the way and supported my special journey that I've built and crafted by myself. And I think that maybe later in this conversation we will talk about what is mentoring for you. And I think, and I will elaborate then. But I think that as these people helped me, took me by the hand and helped me to get into the next level and to the next stage of my career, I think that this is mentoring. I think that this is the essence of helping someone, identifying the passion and the desire, and try to understand what is your exact role in the life of your mentee. And I think that this is very important. important, but as I said, we'll talk about it later. So in Israel, when we are 18, we are joining the army, and I was in the Israel Air Force, and I was many years in the Israeli Air Force. I love my country, and I think that it's not. I think that the fact that today I work in the Israel Space Agency, and it's like serving my country in a civilian space program after the military space program, it connects. It's not a mistake. It matches. So I completed. I joined the Air Force twice. I made my first role, and then I finished the 2 years that I had to do, as everyone had, and I went to the university and studied planetary science and physics at Tel Aviv University, and got my first degree. And I remember that in each step of my first degree, and it happened to me also when I studied my PhD, I was always surprised while I had successes, and and I'm still surprised, and I think that I'm now in a place that I'm sure that there should be no more surprises. I don't have to surprise myself when I have successes, because this is actually my journey, and everything happens for a reason. So it makes sense. But as I finished my first degree, I rejoined the Israel Air Force for technological roles. I had numerous of roles. The last one was head of space technology section. I was a major rank, and I'm very proud of it. And it was the military space program of Israel. And after I left the military, I completed my PhD at the Comet Research Laboratory at Tel Aviv University. And it was my PhD is on the Rosetta mission to Comet 67P to remove Gerasimenko, which is the famous and the coolest and the prettiest, if I may say, comet ever. And it was a very successful PhD. I studied the mechanism of trapping and release volatiles from amorphous ice in comets, and it was fascinating for me. And it was like all my dreams came true, because I couldn't believe that I'm studying planetary science and I'm part of an international mission in the solar system, and it made influence. My PhD, my results made influence on what we know about comets. So it's like another success for me. And I finished my PhD 2.5 years ago, and I'm currently working in the Israel Space Agency. I'm a chief scientific advisor, which means that I'm in charge of the academic research and special projects. And over the last year, I'm also in charge in the collaboration with the UAE Space Agency, with which I met wonderful and committed and very professional group of people. And I will tell you more about it maybe later. So this is about me for now.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Adi and Heather. And I'll just share a little bit about my journey so that our audience knows that there are many different pathways into the space ecosystem, into technology. So I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force right out of high school. So similar to Adi, I went in the military, not compulsory in the U.S., out of choice. And I was, for my first 12 years, then I was an enlisted airman. One, I didn't have the money to go to college. Two, I didn't know what I wanted to be. And three, I wanted to see the world. And this is back in the 80s, when we didn't just get on flights and travel around the world or make international phone calls or have cell phones or any of this. So the best way to see the world was to join the military. And while I was in the military, I was able to go to school at night. And I actually completed my bachelor's degree and almost all my master's degree while I was an enlisted airman. And at that point, I applied to become an officer. So I'll share with the audience, you heard a lot of it. Take advantage of those opportunities. You don't know how the career path is going to go, what's going to happen. And the other thing I'm going to say is persevere, because the first time I applied to be an officer in the U.S. Air Force, I was turned down. because I do not have a STEM degree like Adi does. I had a business degree, and the Air Force was looking for STEM professionals that had, and so my chance of being selected was 12%, 1-2, Tom Brady's number. So those are not good odds. But I tried anyways, and I was turned down. And then I tried again, and I was selected. And that time when I was selected to become a space acquisition officer, and I had no idea what that was, and I did not want to do it because I was an HR, a human relations person, and I wanted to stay in HR. So I was, please let me be HR. And someone from the Air Force Personnel Center called and said, we really need you to be in space acquisition. And I'm so grateful they did that, because that started my career in the space industry. And that's why I'm even here today, because of that one change in my life, becoming an officer and being assigned to a career I had no idea what it was. And it changed my life. So I share with our audience, be open to change, be open to the unknown, take advantage of opportunities. If you can go to school at night, go to school at night. If somebody wants to send you to a leadership course, go to the leadership course. Volunteer for the hard projects. Learn those skills, because you don't know when in your career something's going to happen that puts you on a different path. Similar to Heather, she kind of wigged around a little bit, and now look where she is. So now what I'd like to do is go back to Heather, and I kind of want to ask a little bit about the space ecosystem. So you are very familiar with the U.S. space ecosystem, as well as many, I'll say allies, it sounds like. So maybe the Australians, the Canadians, the Israelis. So could you share with our audience both a little bit about the military side globally, and then also what are some of the civil side, the NASA and civil agency side that you're seeing, and the changes you're seeing?
Oh yeah, this is some great questions. And Adi, that was, I loved your story. And you actually you said you created your own path, and I had literally just written down create your own path, like literally as you said it. So we'll get to that at the end, but I really appreciate your story. So yeah, I mean, space it's kind of interesting. I think with Shelley, you mentioned kind of before cell phones, and I love telling my kids, I was alive before the internet. They think I'm kidding. They think they can't imagine a world, before there was this World Wide Web situation. And so it's interesting, just in their lifetime, and just kind of the way they see the world is it's very global, right? It's just everything is international and global, and that wasn't necessarily the way I saw the world when I was, back in 1980. I lived in California, and I couldn't even figure out what Northern California was. It was too big, right? And so, but we didn't have the kinds of pictures, and we couldn't FaceTime people, and we couldn't do any of that. And so, it's been interesting just to talk about, space is inherently global, and so I think the way our country is thinking about it and approaching it is just a little bit different than the way we've approached things in the past. And so, we're talking, about allied countries and how we're sharing data, how we're sharing information, how we're sharing capabilities. We just embarked on a big agreement with the U.S. with Australia and the UK. It's got some awesome acronym, but as AUSUK or something, I don't know, I can't remember. But some really amazing kind of launch and some different kind of agreements between various countries around, geopolitics, around just like location. I mean, Australia, for certain reasons, is very important to us right now. Israel's always been very important to us. And so kind of building those relationships, and Shelley, back to your point, the diplomacy, they're really getting in there and building those relationships and working on innovation. But we, for a long time, our government, our military kind of had a not invented here kind of thing. And so a lot of, we weren't pulling innovation in from the outside, and definitely not from other countries. That has really changed. I've seen a big shift in not only the willingness, but the excitement about working, with space innovation from other countries. I mean, like I said, mostly I'm not on the technical side at all, but working, I mean, just the mere fact that we stood up Space Force. I mean, we haven't stood up another service, and it's not technically another service, but it basically is. That hasn't happened in a really long time. I mean, in 50, 60 years. And so it's been interesting just to watch how, I mean, space has literally just skyrocketed. It has literally just in importance, for our country, and I think globally, internationally. I mean, just as far as the importance of the intel, of the information, I mean, we've got now people talking about going to Mars. I mean, I'm not even going to go there. Literally not going to go there. But it's just been interesting to watch NASA and how, I mean, I'm not being very coherent right now. I'm just trying to, there's been just a major shift. And just, I think the importance of, and the attention paid to, and I think a huge indicator of that has been how much private capital is going into commercial space, and launching and bringing costs down, and the idea of actually sending people, civilians, right, into space, which, didn't happen before. And so I'm excited. I think it's from a diplomacy standpoint, from an allied, standpoint, I think it's really important. I think it's a unifier. It's awesome just to watch our military, partner with some of these other countries. But I'm inspired by it, and we're doing everything that we can, on the private capital side, to make sure that there's clean, trusted capital going into these capabilities, so that they aren't compromised. I always go to that. Sorry, it's what I think about all the time. But I just and also just to hammer on something that Adi said about kind of her pathway. I joke, but I don't know when the last time I updated my resume was. I don't think I've applied for a job in a really long time, and I kind of make up new jobs. And so I will say this: I don't think any job that I've had since I left Capitol Hill, I didn't even know it was a job, or it wasn't a job, and I was the first one to kind of invent it. So just kind of as you're figuring out, what you like, and you're seeing some white space, and like, hey, that's something that I'm passionate about. Also, passion will get there. I think you can tell we're all very passionate about what we do. But don't be confined to kind of, this is a job title, I need to submit my resume. You will go through that, but kind of figure out, where was a skill set that I have, and what is maybe, a skill set that's missing, from a certain ecosystem or community. But I'm just excited about really the international, like, and global effects of space, and how it's becoming, I think, a lot more, not user friendly. What's the word? Just less government only, right? And I think it's becoming a lot more accessible. I think people are getting into space a lot more. It's not just this far-reaching government kind of thing. I think that it's becoming, I think people are going to have the opportunity to go to space, and I think people are feeling much more connected to it outside of government and military.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Well, Adi, I'd really like to know what you see as the space ecosystem in Israel, because Israel has had a different model. I mean, you've had private citizens decide to launch astronauts into space and do kind of a fundraising campaign, which is like the first time that's ever been done. So a new grassroots way of launching astronauts, as opposed to you have to be part of a government agency. So you've seen a lot of change in Israel, but you're also part of that part of the Abraham Accord with the UAE, as well as Artemis. Obviously, Israel is part of the Artemis Accord with NASA. So really love to see your perspective on that, and how you see that regional partnership continuing to grow, both within the Middle East, the MENA region, as well as with the US and other allies. As Heather says, there's a lot of synergy with Australia and the UK and others.
Okay, so I will tell you a little bit more about it. Actually, you were correct twice, because we signed the Abraham Accords, and also we joined the Artemis program, which I think it is one of the greatest things that the Israel Space Agency has done lately or ever. I am very excited about it. I think that going to the moon and going to Mars, it's a great opportunity, not only for scientists and not only for educational inspiration, but also for the space ecosystem, because we know that when we try to create a large and space programs with humans, I think that we have to include many companies and startups, and I think that it makes the ecosystem very alive, and I think that it is very interesting time. And I will tell you a little bit about the Abraham Accords and the opportunity that I had and the honor that I had to work with the UAE Space Agency. So basically, over the last year, we decided the collaboration with the UAE Space Agency and talking about the signing an MOU on space collaborations. And on October, we went to Dubai to the during the Dubai Expo, and we had a lovely signing ceremony with the Ministry of Technology and Science at the UAE Space Agency, Her Excellency Sarah Al-Amiri, with our Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, Orit Farkas-Cohen, and it was very, how can I say, I can't even find the word. It was very exciting. It was very exciting for me, and because I'm a scientist, I don't work with other countries in international collaborations, and I was in charge of everything from Israel, and it was very exciting for me, and and it was great. It was a great experience, and we went to Dubai over during October, and we had the ceremony. And one of the collaborations that we've signed during this MOU is a scientific collaboration in a joint call for proposal for environmental research based on Venus satellite, which is a remote sensing, environmental and precise agriculture and water body monitoring and climate change monitoring satellite Venus satellite is a joint collaboration of the Israel Space Agency and CNES, the French Space Agency, and it was very important to us to try to create other joints, other collaborations with other countries, and I think that UAE Space Agency is a great partner, and I have the honor, and it is very. I think that I won't go into it. But I think that the work, the professional work, and the warm hospitality that we have, and the relationships that we are initiating, I think it is very important for the whole area. And I'm looking forward to doing the same thing with Bahrain and Morocco and other countries. I think that Israel is a great partner. We are a startup nation in every high-tech field that you can imagine, and I think that in space as well. We would love to create other mutual projects, collaborations with countries around us. It is very important.
Fantastic. And what I share is that Heather started her journey in public policy, and Adi is now starting that journey in international affairs. What I'd like to share with the audience is, let me share a little bit about how space has evolved over the last 60 years. You know, we think about space and what it offers, but when we really think back 60 years ago, it was a space race between two primary countries, the US and Russia. Who would put a man into space and on the moon first? And when you look, so it's primarily white males. It was two countries. You're looking that they worked for the government. You were either in the formal Air Force or a civil agency like NASA, or you worked for a defense contractor, and you were a STEM professional. And that was it. And now, Heather, I think the word you were looking for is democratization of space. But now what we see is more than 90 countries are operating in space. More countries want to operate in space, and all countries want to utilize space technology. So now we had two countries 60 years ago. Now every country wants to either operate in space or use space technology to better the lives of their citizens. We now are open to all countries. So not just two, but all. So that's a great diversity. You're seeing a panel today with 3 women. There are wonderful men in the space industry as well, but you're seeing now where there's women in the space industry. And we are open to, we still want Adi, and we still want those STEM professionals and scientists and engineers and mathematicians. We need rocket scientists and astronauts, but we also need other skills now. Like I shared, I have a business degree. Heather is doing investment and financing. You have international relations. You have artists. We want to thank Women Tech Network and Anna for the work she's doing. We need podcasters and artists and project managers. And eventually we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and how you can be part of the space industry as an entrepreneur. So I really wanted to share that the stories you're hearing today are about how space once was and how it really is today. And although your region of the world may not be the same as the US space industry or Israel space agency, all countries are starting to look at how does space benefit their citizens with, and we talked about it, precision agriculture, healthcare, data analytics, the supply chain, cyber, AI, machine learning, and more. So when you think of all those emerging technologies, they're part of the space ecosystem as well. So with that, now what I do want to pivot to, Heather and Adi, I'll kind of just throw this out there and maybe we just have a conversation. We've both talked a lot, or all three of us have talked about international collaboration. We've talked about NASA and the Artemis Accord. We've talked about, Heather, you've talked about the UK and Australia doing a lot of things. Adi, you have your relationships with the UAE and potentially, Bahrain and Morocco and others. So international seems to be an area of collaboration and growing the space ecosystem. So I'd really like to just kind of hear your thoughts on that international partnerships. And I will highlight on Christmas Day, the 25th of December, James Webb Space Telescope was launched, and that was an international collaboration. And in 2031, we're going to deorbit the International Space Agency. So what are the next steps? So over to you to tell me, where are we going with international partnerships?
Do you want to go first? You want me to go first? I'll just start with AUKUS is the acronym I was looking for with the Australian partnership. But I think it's an awesome sign, to be honest, that we're developing these sorts of partnerships, and I think it's the right industry to be doing it in. But it's encouraging and something I won't get too into, but just, we're looking at, kind of great power competition right now. And I think the face of trusted allied nations and those that we aren't trusting as much right now is really coming to a head. And not that I want to make this about war or anything, but the reality is that I think that people are kind of picking sides right now. And so we're going to see a lot of these sorts of alliances and agreements and accords. And it's important, and it's important that we can trust other nations and they can trust us. And, being in the United States, we get put way up here a lot, which is an honor and a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. And so I think that, we take it very seriously, with who we partner with. And I think that, based on this shift in great power competition, I think it's necessary, it's encouraging. And space is so exciting and really, I think a really important place for us to be having these partnerships. But Adi knows much more about the partnership side than I do. I just know that as far as as our country moving forward in the way that I hope it does, I think it's critical.
I would like to talk about the opportunities and the collaboration, and talk about the International Space Station, which I think that it is a great story. And I think that we all know that it's going to last at least up to 2030. And I'm very happy for that. And I would like to share with you the Rakia mission, the Israeli Rakia mission. And let me tell you about it because it's very exciting. It's collaboration, international collaboration. It's the International Space Station, and it's for the daily lives on Earth, and it's for the humans on board the ISS. So let me share with you a few things about it. So during the next March, the Rakia mission, Rakia actually in Hebrew means sky. The Rakia mission will be carried out, sending the second Israeli to space. It's going to be an historic because it's a commercial mission to the ISS, and you know that we've only had our first national astronauts, Ilan Ramon, and this is actually the next Israeli in space. Actually, we don't call him a national astronaut because it's a commercial flight, and he bought a ticket. If we're talking about space tourism and the space ecosystem, and who is going to go to space and who can afford it. But these are all things that let me put aside for a minute. And the purpose of the Rakia mission is to inspire younger generation and also advance the Israeli aerospace industries, because this is the first time that we have a chance for entrepreneurs and researchers to send experiments into a true microgravity conditions, not in vacuum chambers and in laboratories on Earth, but in the International Space Station. It is very exciting for us. It's going to be more than 30 experiments from all over the country that are going to be sent to the ISS with the second Israeli to space, Eitan Stiva. And he's going to conduct most of them by himself, and to operate most of them by himself, and they're going to be tested in microgravity conditions. And I think that one of the things, if you allow me to talk a little bit about science, because this is actually my true passion, if you think about it, most of the time and most of the research that has been in the ISS during the years, not only about humans but also about vegetation and animals, is the difficulties to stay in microgravity and all the bad things that it creates to our body. But there are advantages in microgravity, and this is exactly the story of the Rakia mission, because all the experiments that are going to be sent to the ISS are going to test the advantages that microgravity can supply or can enable these experiments, these scientific experiments. Some of them are going to be about testing new nanodrugs for cancer, and others are going to test different kinds of crystallization in microgravity conditions. And I think that it's going to be a very exciting time for the Israeli space ecosystem, because this is the first time that we are getting the chance to do that. So we are very excited about it.
Fantastic. And I think this is a good segue to talk about what is that technology. We've heard, okay, space was a race, and, there could be sides pairing up again. And is there another space race going on? And there certainly is. And it's a race in technology. And that's why we're on Women Tech Network today. If you're interested in being an entrepreneur and commercializing space technology, you can go to the NASA Technology Transfer Office right now. You can Google it, type it in, or the European Space Agency Technology Transfer Office. There are thousands of patents that are waiting to be commercialized from space technology, from water purification and precision agriculture. Again, how do we grow food in austere conditions? How do we purify water? How do we purify air? Communication, transportation, healthcare. So Adi talked about the great healthcare, cataract surgery, mammogram technology, formulated food, weather prediction, fire retardant clothing. All of these have come from space technology. And there are 15,000 or more patents just in the US government alone, with NASA, the Department of Energy, Air Force Research Lab, and more. And you can apply for a Small Business Innovative Research Grant many times to start looking at this technology and looking at how you could get it to technology readiness level 1 to 3. And the European Space Agency also has programs. So for entrepreneurs out there, you heard about the great technology Adi mentioned about we can do manufacturing in space. We can look at those activities. It's there. The other thing I'll share is we've talked about it a little bit is we're signing the Artemis Accords, but why? And the reason is the U.S., in collaboration with other countries, is going to return to the moon under the Artemis. And Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, the Greek god. But the goal of going to the moon is then on to Mars and beyond. And here are some great things for our audience. Going to the moon is also about looking at renewable energy, because there are minerals on the moon, helium-3, that could solve our energy problems here on planet Earth. And it could change the way we look at climate change. We can look at growing food on the moon and Mars in different manners, because we can't grow food using Martian soil. It's poisonous to humans. So we're going to have to look at hydroponics and activities like that. Well, we also know on planet Earth, we really need to look at growing food differently than we do now. The method we use now is not sustainable. It can't feed everyone on the planet. As human beings, the population continues to grow. We have to look at new ways of feeding the planet. We have to look at new ways of purifying the water. So as you're listening to all these great technologies, we need innovators like yourselves, Women Tech Network, to look at becoming entrepreneurs. And there's many other patents and technologies out there to help benefit lives. As we said, Adi said, those challenges of living in microgravity environment, they're great for experiments and maybe manufacturing in space. But for the human body, we are designed to live on planet Earth with an atmosphere that protects us from radiation and gravity that maintains our muscle and bone density. When we leave planet Earth, our muscles start to atrophy, and your heart is a muscle, and your fluids don't know how to portion themselves, and you can lose your sight. So there are many things, and we need great people like yourself to go to that NASA website, look at those patents under healthcare, commercialize them, and make our lives better right here on planet Earth. So I hope I've motivated some of our listeners who are women in tech and allies in tech and men in tech to realize that space has an opportunity for you to be an entrepreneur, or go partner with somebody else who wants to be an entrepreneur and bring this to market. So Heather, I'm going to come back to you now that we've excited all these entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit, you're an entrepreneur in resident.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And then what type of advice do you give entrepreneurs who want to commercialize technology or who might have an idea? How do you help them become more successful?
Absolutely. So entrepreneur in residence, I was the co-founder of an electric motor company. We were actually looking at electric motors that were far more efficient, that didn't use rare earths. So back to some of your points, we've got, a lot of, as some of our minerals are being depleted, and basically the way that they're mined is a problem. They also become part of this great power competition and highly politicized. How can we create things that don't require them? And so going through that experience in hardware, being a female, going and raising money, the whole thing. Part of what I'm trying to do is create an easier atmosphere for all entrepreneurs, frankly. But absolutely for women. And there's been a lot of attention paid here in Silicon Valley recently to the idea that women founded startups are only about less than 10%, I think, of venture funding. It's much less than that. So a lot of attention paid to that. There have actually been certain venture funds that have been formed around the idea of really focusing on women and minority entrepreneurs. And so there's a lot of attention being paid. There's also a lot of great startups that already exist. So if you don't quite want to run one, but you want to work in one that's that might have funding already, might be I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur for working with other entrepreneurs. And so if it's not kind of something you have experience with, there's a reason that there are serial entrepreneurs, because it is a skill set, and it's one that you learn just like kind of any other skill set. So jumping in, finding a startup, and it's really interesting right now with frankly with COVID and how remote things are. So even if you're in a location that isn't smack in the middle of Silicon Valley or in Israel, like there's a lot of work that you can do remotely. So don't count that out. And as far as figuring out, where are some of these earlier stage space related startups, or hydroponics related startups, or precision ag related startups, that's something. Do some nosing around. Find. I go to LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn all the time shameless. LinkedIn with me. Shoot me a note after this and start digging around and looking for the startups that, some say stealth, or start going through, looking at actually just to get tactical, like looking at venture fund websites and finding like Lux Capital is a great resource and they have a great space portfolio. InQtel has a great space portfolio. Just start kind of digging around and looking and figuring out, starting to work with a startup, learning from entrepreneurs, and then potentially at some point, doing it yourself. But resilience is required. It's difficult, but I think, space, there's been such a massive tipping point, like I said, on the commercial side and then on the private capital side. So people are funding space startups like never before. And people are really excited about them. And so if being an entrepreneur in the space realm is something of interest to you, now's the time. There's a lot of money out there, but to Shelley's point, going to the NASA site, AFRL, start asking to meet with people, like even if you don't even know why, and just start picking their brain, and people will give you time, and it's not a bother. They want to give you time and they want to get you involved in this. And again, with kind of our virtual environment, it's easier than ever. So just start asking questions. Like I said, I have faked it till I made it so many times, and just kind of get in there and start asking questions and figure out how to create some solutions.
I would like to say something about that. You talked about, Shelley, that space that is very important in our daily lives, and most of us sitting back at home and listening, even listening to this conversation, thinking that the space is very far, but it's actually here. We are using it all the time, and you're right when you think that space is challenging us when we try to create new inventions for spaceships and spacecraft, and to go over the solar system and to unsolve the mysteries of the universe, like James Webb is going to do. But I think that what is great about space, that it challenges us and it makes us to think outside of the box. And I think that most of the ideas, the creative ideas, can come from that. And if I will just give you an example, because for me, it's a common example because I live and breathe space, but let me tell you a nice story. And if you know, it will be great to hear it again. I'm not sure that many of you know that the diaper that we're all using in our home as moms was invented for astronaut suits. Because astronauts, when they stay in the International Space Station, they wear T-shirts and shorts and everything is very cool. But if they need to fix something outside of the International Space Station, they have to wear the astronaut suit, because the conditions outside the International Space Station is not very similar to the conditions that we need to stay alive. So someone invented the diaper for this specific need. And when they came back to Earth, someone else looked at the diaper and said, there could be other customers for this invention. Maybe we can take it and make it a little bit different and sell it to other sectors, to other customers. And look, it is, I don't know if you used it, but I have 3 kids that, and I used it many times. So this is just one example for how space, and when you think that it is very far and very only for scientists and space rockets, and it's not, it's for all of us, okay? It's the ways navigation, and it's the purification of water, as Shelley mentioned before, and diaper, and many other inventions that were invented for space uses. And we enjoy them on daily lives. And I think that this is what is going to be great in the coming years, because I think that this is not only these examples, but there are going to be factories in space. Because as I said before, if we can understand, or if we can discover that there are advantages for creating or manufacturing drugs and crystallization of other parts of mechanism or optics, or I won't go into this because it's a little bit complicated, it can be an advantage to use space. So I think that all these examples brings space closer to us, and it makes us understand that it's here, it's now. And another thing that I would like to tell you is that a third of the Earth population is not connected to the internet, and they can't watch us right now only because they can't Google us, because they don't have the internet, because they live far away and they don't have the infrastructure. And I think that one of the greatest things in new space trends is that you can build a lot of infrastructure in space for communication satellites and IoT and internet and 5G and whatever and buzzword you prefer, and you can connect every dot. It doesn't matter how far you live. And just imagine that when this third part of the Earth population will start Google and they will watch us, they will learn about us, and they will start share about their culture and about their food recipes and about their thoughts, and maybe, I don't know, share their music and new ways of education. And I think that it will be, I think this is the next thing that we should expect when we think about how space is here, and it gives us so much.
I think that's great, Adi. That's one of the things at Space Foundation we believe in that It is exciting to go on to the moon and Mars and beyond, but how does that innovation benefit us here on Earth? And I think many citizens on planet Earth want to understand, how does it benefit me? So I'm going to hold up one of my favorite things that I can't leave home without, because for those of you who have a cell phone and take a selfie, there are several types of space technology just in your cell phone, from the imaging of your camera to algorithms, the ability for your apps to work with GPS. So your phone alone has several types of space technology. And I don't have a credit card, but we'll pretend I have a credit card or a bank card. You cannot use the financial system of the world without GPS, because GPS is the original blockchain. And what I mean by that is, when you go to an ATM and get money, or you buy something on your credit card, on that receipt is a date timestamp from GPS, which validates that that transaction was legitimate. So it's the original blockchain before there was blockchain. And Heather will tell you all about blockchain.
Not today.
So I share with you, with the audience, that most of you are using space every day. Your food may have come from another country. It's winter here in Colorado, so we're getting a lot of produce from Chile. That is being moved on transportation using GPS. GPS was a U.S. government investment for the military that was commercialized so that the world could use it. And that has become a critical infrastructure for business now. Think about Uber and Airbnb and Lyft and all the apps we have on our phone that are using GPS. GPS has unlocked innovation and created billions of dollars in economic development around the world. And so what Adi highlighted is, as we can bring more users into this global space ecosystem by creating satellite internet, we then create new ideas, new innovators, new entrepreneurs. We can help individuals rise out of poverty, send their children to school, create, grow better food, better crops using precision agriculture. You can go to NASA and learn all about NASA's role in increasing crop yields using space technology. So I'm going to stop there and just share with our audience that you're using space every day if you're watching this video, because right now we're using space technology. So Heather, I do want to ask you some questions, because you've had a couple partners along the way. Tell me a little bit about those partnerships and how they helped you, and what do we want to share with our audience today about building partnerships, relationships, mentorships?
That's a great question. And I was just talking yesterday with a group who is putting together a large investment fund around semiconductors, which is a whole another topic for another day. And I think everyone's kind of aware of the importance of semiconductors and the shortages we're having around manufacturing and that sort of thing. And so, and what I was really impressed with this group that was discussing this large fund was they kept talking about partnerships. And I think a lot of times people, who want to be entrepreneurial think, I'm going to just build it, start from scratch. And so many times there are existing groups, organizations, companies, academic institutions, that you should partner with and bring into that kind of ecosystem, and not always start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. And so I'll just use a little bit of an example. We were starting something called Elemental Accelerator, which again was using Hawaii as a test bed, in this case for energy innovation. Instead of, and Hawaii seems maybe like a weird choice, but it was really interesting because of the culture of Hawaii, everyone knows one another. And so getting in there and having an early stage energy entrepreneur very quickly build a relationship or a partnership with the utility that might have otherwise taken 2 to 3 years, if ever, frankly, because if you're a mainland company coming over to Hawaii, it's very difficult to build those sorts of relationships. And so a lot of what our organization did was enable those partnerships, right? So people ask, we took about $30 million of Navy money that was given to us, and leveraged about $2 billion in private capital. But that's not even the important part. What's important is we were actually getting early stage innovative technologies onto a working grid to see if they were going to actually work or not. And then we had, partnerships with large resorts. And so we were doing energy efficiency in the built environment. And again, just building those partnerships and those relationships very quickly. That ended up being the magic, kind of the secret sauce of why this was so important. And so I think as you know, as mentors, a lot of what mentoring is here in the Valley, or where you bring on advisors to a company, or you take, we call it smart money versus dumb money. So smart money is you're taking it from investors who can actually help you create and help you move faster. Like they have the relationships, they have partnerships that exist, whether it's with other investors to syndicate an investment, or whether it's with potential first customers, that sort of thing. So anytime that you're building anything and you can get in there and start building partnerships with existing entities, of course, that you've vetted and you know are legitimate, it just helps everything move more quickly. And so we know, as I mentioned Space Force and SpaceWorks a little bit, and I'm really impressed with the way that they aren't trying to reinvent the wheel. They're reaching out to, they're watching commercial space grow and go faster, frankly, than government space has gone in the past. And so to build relationships with investors and to have them be the eyes and the ears about, who are the top-notch entrepreneurs and who's got some really, cutting edge technology. Let's have those conversations, but to build an ecosystem of advisors, of mentors that can help you kind of figure out, if you want to, break into the space and you don't, that's not your background, finding those people that can help, build those partnerships. That's pretty much what I've done my whole life is get people who aren't inherently working together to work together, or to at least explore the option. Right. And so I do believe in serendipity. I think it's more than serendipity. It's more than luck. It's more than, it's real. And I think a lot of times those collisions happen not always intentionally, but I think that the more that we can bring existing entities together and form partnerships, and like we're talking, we talked about doing that with other countries as well, I think is mission critical. It's everything. And I encourage people to kind of pick their heads up once in a while and not everything has to be reinvented or built, but can be leveraged and can be built upon.
Fantastic. Adi, did you have some thoughts about some partnerships you've had along the way and mentorship that helped you get to where you are, as well as the space ecosystem?
I think that along the way, as I mentioned before, I had a few chances, not in the sense of collaboration, but in the sense of meeting people that are professional and help me to shape my career. And I think that this is exactly what we're trying to do in the Israel Space Agency today. One of the roles that I have is I'm in charge of the scholarships for the space ecosystem in Israel and international space ecosystem, in the sense of creating scholarships to Israelis abroad, like in the ICU, the International Space University, and others. And this is a chance for me to say that if you have an ideas for another scholarships abroad for Israeli space people, please share with me. You can link me, you can chat me, you can whatever you like, because this is very important, because this is the time in Israel that we are trying to create new scholarships, not only in Israel, but also to give the chance for entrepreneurs and for young scientists and young people in the space ecosystem and companies, and there are not so many in Israel, the chance to go to other countries and collaborate and meet other people. And I think that this is one of the things that are very important, because Israel is very small. And, when we talk about large collaborations, I'm trying to scratch my head and think, what can I share? Because there are not so many, and we've had a lot of collaboration in the sense of space agencies, and I'm not going to elaborate because I don't think this is the right platform or the right conversation. I would like to think about or to talk about the specific people, you and me. How can we create a better chance for others that are listening now? Because if you're sitting at home and you're thinking about entering the space ecosystem, the new space ecosystem, what are the steps that you need to take, or what are the options that you can have and to get involved? Because food security and climate change and agri-tech and health tech and med tech and all these kind of short tech words, or words with tech at the end of them, all of them are going to be needed in the space sector, once we go to the moon and to Mars and to commercialize space stations, and also on Earth to make our lives even better. So if you know about these opportunities for specific people, for individuals, please let me know, because this is exactly what I'm doing these days in the Israel Space Agency. So this is your homework.
This is your homework. I like that. One of the things I'll share is the Space Foundation has a workforce development roadmap, and both Heather and Adi have touched on pieces of it. And it's 5 steps. One is awareness, access, training, connecting, and mentoring. First, you have to be aware that you can be part of the space ecosystem, technology, and that's what today's program is about. We're trying to give you awareness that you can join us. Then you have to create an access point. And is that access point, you listen to this webinar. Women Tech Network is offering mentoring programs right now, or their upcoming conferences taking place in June. What are some access points to come into that space ecosystem? Go to the NASA Technology Transfer Office, go to the ESA one, check out some of those resources Heather talked about. There are ways that you can start to access into this industry. Then you may need training. So if you want to come into the space industry, maybe you need formal training where you go to the International Space University, like Adi mentioned, or maybe it's informal, or it's a fellowship, or it's an internship. Then we talk about the networking, and that's what both Heather and Adi have shared. You need to start networking and building partnerships with others that are in this industry. Women Tech Network is amazing. Join Women Tech Network. Space Generation Advisory Council, the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, Toad Air, Women in Aerospace. There are so many organizations that will support you. And although women is in the title, they're open to men and women to be mentors and to be proteges. And then 5 is, not only should you look for a mentor, but be a mentor. You can be a mentor at any point in your career to somebody else that you may have a skill set more developed than they do. A college student can mentor a high school student, and an early career professional can mentor a college student. So you can be a mentor at any point. And so Women Tech Network is open to mentorship. So please join Women Tech Network, be a mentor and find a mentor. And also come to the Women Tech Network global conference that will take place 7 through 10 June virtually. And you will be seeing Adi, myself, and Heather as well. We are submitting some virtual sessions. So you'll get to join us again in some other sessions that relate to more about emerging trends and mentoring, how to have a transformational mentoring experience. So make sure you pencil that conference on your calendar. And there are many, many other opportunities. So with that, what I want to say is we have a few more minutes. So if anybody has some questions, we have about 10 more minutes. What I want to ask Heather and Adi are, what are some of your biggest lessons learned? Or phrased another way, what would you have done differently knowing what you know today? So those could be failures. Those are lessons learned. Those are, I learned it the hard way. There's many ways to caveat that. So Heather, I'll start with you.
Oh, this is good. I truly wouldn't change anything, because who knows where I'd be, if I think for me, there's a movie called Sliding Doors, and there's that, that moment, and there's that moment you can pinpoint when your life could have gone this way or could have gone this way. And I think everybody has them. And I think being aware of them, appreciating them. But, no joke. I was about 10 days from starting Stanford Law School, and I was working for Senator Boxer. So I started out kind of in the policy realm, and Senator Schumer was a brand new senator, and it just beat El D'Amato from New York, and came out and asked if there was, probably some lackey who could drive him around for the day. And so he and I ended up spending, 13 hours driving around the Bay Area doing meetings together. And at the end of the day, he said, "Would you come work for me in Washington?" And and it took me about 2 seconds. I said, yes. And so that's a success. I mean, that was, but it kind of back to the passion, trust your gut, first of all, ladies. I think that's a superpower that we have. And I mean, there's things, and then I was at Stanford for a number of years. And I stopped for a second. I said, okay, I've worked in government. I've worked in academia. I said, I've never worked for a company that has, a stock price and has shareholders and has to make money. I'd never had to think about making money in my previous admittance that I'm painfully unmotivated by it. So I decided to stop for a minute and go and work at Cisco, a large networking company, to kind of get that experience. And how do I say this politely? I hated it. But I learned a lot. Like I didn't enjoy it, but I learned a lot. And I actually was, I had just come back from having my first daughter. And so I had a little one at home, and we'd made we'd negotiated a flexible work schedule so I could be at home with her some. And right when that happened, a stimulus package, is way back in 2008, had just passed. And I was the only one with government appropriations and budget experience. And so the only one who kind of could help our company, manage through that. And so right away I get back to work, and I know this happens to a lot of women. And all of a sudden I was told, sorry, we can't honor the flexible work program. We need butt in seat every day. And it took me about 2 seconds. And I said, thank you very much. I resign. And it was the easiest decision I ever made. And it was scary. And I probably should have told my husband I was going to do that before I did it. But you know what? I started a consulting company, and that's how. And I remember, this again, another completely happenstance, introduction to this company called Terviva. They grow an oil seed tree, and they crush it out, and it's like a soybean oil drop-in, and then they actually have a protein-rich seed cake. So talking about some of the food stuff. But it was so interesting. So that one random meeting, they became my first client, and I started taking them to Hawaii, which is how I got introduced to the Navy. I mean, it's this weird spiral, and I really like my weird spiral journey. And we've done a lot of things right, done a lot of things wrong. I have failed so many times. I was talking about the elemental accelerator, and I kind of like to just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks, rather than creating the perfect plan. And minute 2, it's not the perfect plan. And so our first cohort of companies, we were kind of going back and forth, how many mainland companies, how many Hawaiian companies. And it was such a train wreck that we call it the wolf pack. We won't even call it cohort 1. So many things were done wrong. But we learned so much so quickly by doing it wrong than we would have if we had tried to figure out exactly how to do it right. And we would never have figured it out. It would have taken on a whole different, pathway. So just failing is important. It's really important. And very quickly realizing I don't like the direction I'm going. I need to change it. And that's what I would just really encourage you all, if you're sitting there and, you wake up every day, or you go to a job, or maybe you've been out of the workforce for a while. Maybe you're a mom and we're out of the workforce for a while. Just jump in, but you'll know what feels right. You'll know as you do. But don't be afraid to just chalk it up to lesson learned. And but as long as you're learning, you're not failing, right? So every time I failed, I learned a lot, and I wouldn't be where I am. And I also, especially working with government and working, in entrepreneurship, which 9 out of 10 are supposed to fail, basically. It's kind of the odds. You fail all the time, but again, you learn and you get back up and you dust stuff off, and you take those lessons, and back to the mentorship idea, and you share those lessons. I think don't just keep them for yourself and say, I tried that. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. But yeah, I don't know. I fail all the time. And we're part of what I do. Actually, part of my entrepreneur residence is actually working with the military to teach them that it's okay to fail, because in the military, you're taught that it's not okay to fail. And failure is frowned upon, and you don't then get promoted. And so we do a lot of it. We don't call it failure, but you start and you iterate. You start, you learn, you learn, you shift, you pivot, right? You pivot. That's a nice way of saying failed. I'm going to try something else. But that's part of the vernacular now. And I really encourage, and if you decide, you think about, hey, I'd like to explore, going into the space industry, do it. Just start talking to people. And you'll know right away if it's a good fit for you. But yeah, I encourage that. But so many failures, and so many, not doors slammed in faces, but so many no's. And when we were starting this electric motor company, again, I had no business being a co-founder of an electric motor company. The founder was this amazing woman out of Chicago, and she found this technology inside of Illinois Institute of Technology, and she said, this has to exist in the world. This has to be off of this shelf and in the world. And I had connectivity to the Navy Electric Ships Initiative. And so I was able to get, some Navy dollars. And so again, I was not a co-founder of a company. building electric motors. I didn't even know how to spell neodymium or dysprosium. Like, I knew none of this. And you know what? You just start going, and very quickly, we were able to get that technology, into, actually it ended up being sold to LG. We were using it for appliances after a while, but amazing electric, efficient motors, not using rare earths. And again, I had no idea what I was doing. But to make you all, so we became part of the Clean Tech Open. So in 2012, we were part of the Clean Tech Open cohort, and we were the first women ever to win. Which was really cool. And they played the Star Wars music, and I said, "Where's the Wonder Woman theme? Come on with this!" And it turned out that one of the judges was Gary Roughhead, former Chief of Naval Operations for the Navy, obviously. And he saw us, and and we got out there. And I was nervous, and I learned how to pitch, and all the things. But just make yourself uncomfortable, and don't be afraid to fail. Like, don't, because you're not going to learn anything if you're not failing.
Adi, over to you. What are some lessons learned? Or as Elon Musk says, fail fast, learn from it. What do you want to share with our audience on some lessons you've learned in your life?
I would like to share this. I would not change anything in my journey. All the difficulties, the failures, the dilemmas, the weird and difficult and strange decisions are all part of my personal journey. And I love it. And I look back and I think that I wouldn't change anything. But every time on a day like this, an international day like this, I'm always asked for a tip for the audience. So my tip is to be brave. Be brave, choose bravely, and choose it every day for a long time, for years to come, and make sure that you love what you do. It's not a cliche, or if it's a cliche, it is a cliche because it's true. Choose bravely and love what you do, and do it with all the passion and all your heart, and don't be afraid to fail, because this is life, and this is part of the lesson that we're supposed to learn. So I wish you all well, and it was a great talk.
Wonderful. I'm going to say, Sarah, we're glad that you've learned a lot today. For our audience, please feel free to let Women Tech Network know, whether on LinkedIn or other things, that you've enjoyed today's talk. We hope to bring you more of these great webinars where you get to hear from experts in the tech industry that relates to all of space. We also want to remind you again, about 7 to 10 June is the Women Tech Network Global Conference. You will see all of us on several panels there. I do have a woman from Turkey who's asking about programs. Go to Space Generation Advisory Council. Check them out. They have partnerships. Also, the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs has networking programs. So I would recommend you go there, as well as join Women Tech Network, request a mentor through Women Tech Network that might be able to help you. And Dr. Tammy, choose bravely. I love that. So we have less than 1 minute. So Adi, if you want to do any closing remarks, first of all, I want to thank you both, thank Anna, and thank Women Tech Network. Annie, close us out, and then Heather. I meant Adi. Adi, you
me first. Okay, so actually I did it before, but I would like to say once again that this is a very important day, and I wish that we won't have to celebrate it in years to come, because it will be,
Normal.
Like the obvious thing that women in science is a common thing, exactly as men. So I wish us all a very quiet and healthy year. And it was great talking to you. And Shelley, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. And Anna, it was great meeting you, and Heather as well. It was great. And I'm waiting to hear about the journey of your daughter during June, you would like to share with me. and I invite you all, the audience, if you would like to share your thoughts, or to ask me questions on LinkedIn or in the chat, or whatever you like, in email, feel free, please. We are all part of this great Women Tech Network, and I think that this is very important. So thank you.
All right, Heather, you have less than a minute to wrap us up.
I will just say that I wake up every day and I love what I do, and I pinch myself that I get to do it. And, Adi said it earlier, like, create your path, find something that just gets you fired up. I have so much energy. I'm 47 years old and I have more energy than most 20-year-olds that I know, because I wake up every day and I'm so passionate about it and I care about it. And I think I've pretty much I can kind of will things into happening at this point. Just start talking about it. If you have, a dream or a goal, just start talking about it, and make it part of your story, and create your path and have a lot of passion, and don't give up ever.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you again. Thank you to Anna and Women Tech Network. We hope you'll join us 7 to 10 June at the Women Tech Global Conference. And we'll talk to Anna about seeing if we can do another one of these Women in Space Tech events, maybe for the International Day of Women next month on 8 March. I want to thank our audience. Thank you for all the questions. Keep sending those to Women Tech Network. Join up to be a member of Women Tech Network. And thank you and congratulations to all our international women and girls in science. Farewell.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you.
I love the comments.
Yeah, so sweet.
I don't want to hang up. Oh, thanks. Thanks, you guys.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.